Hi, this is a rerun of a presentation we gave to the London not-for-profit group, Salesforce user group in December 2014 for attendees who couldn't make it or who would like to go back over some of the content. So the presentation was entitled Delivering Enterprise Mobility, and I'm Justin Halfpenny. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MobileCaddy. And just before we started, and this applies really to the recording as well, we asked for attendees to ask questions, to get involved, and also to challenge us as we go through. And so this extends to the recording as well. Please feel free to comment on the video and push back directly to me. My contact details are on the end of the presentation. So question time really before we start is to think about if your organization has staff or volunteers, partners who work outside of the office of your normal place of work, and what that means when we start to think about enterprise mobility. So we're really going to try to answer three questions, all phrased around enterprise mobility. So the who, which organizations can take advantage of the move to mobile? What is driving organizations to embark on mobile strategies? And how that works, how we start. But first, we're going to cover the what. What is enterprise mobility? The way we think of that is 15 years ago, Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce.com, asked, why can't enterprise software be like Amazon.com? And really what he was referring to was it was very easy for consumers to, at that time, order books through Amazon.com, and yet the enterprise software they were using in their place of work was extremely clunky, slow, outdated. And the question really was, why should we accept that in the workplace and have a completely different experience on our consumer facing software? And we're really extending that now, not us ourselves, but us as employees and partners and customers. And we're expecting mobile enterprise software to be the same as Amazon mobile apps. So when we did the presentation, we asked how many people actually had the Amazon mobile app on their device, their phone, their tablet. The majority of the room answered positively. And we asked how many people had in the last month placed an order and received an order. And again, that was a very high percentage in the room. And then we asked how many had experienced any failure in that process or any training. And there was no hands up. So in other words, an app was delivered to us via an app store with no training, just worked out the block, and we have ordered and gone through a whole process. And that's really what our expectation is for enterprise mobile software, mobile apps. And so the aim of the presentation really was to not pitch anything particularly, but to start to get people to really think about, if your organization really embraced mobile, had an app or a series of apps, as Amazon does, what could your organization achieve? But also to be aware of the challenges that we have to face when we go mobile. But at the end of the day, be really inspired about what can be achieved. If we look at who's mobile, often people think, well, that's a field worker or someone who's visiting offices or whatever, visiting locations. But actually, every organization is mobile. In fact, in the presentation, I noted that every attendee worked for an organization, and by the very nature of them being there, they were obviously mobile themselves. And that also extends beyond the organization, from employee or volunteer or partner to pretty much everyone, including other constituents, particularly customers or end users for not-for-profits. And then we looked at the question of why. Why would an organisation want to embrace enterprise mobility? And we had a few Q&As in the room to give some examples and some feelings about how people saw that. And then we distilled that into really pushing that boundary and thinking, what would happen if the full power of Salesforce was in the pocket of everyone and whenever they needed it and wherever they needed it? Again, what benefits would the organisations realise? And what benefits would the individuals interacting with that organisation realise? And how would the cause benefit? And although this is a non-for-profit presentation, the cause could definitely be a commercial cause as well. So we then looked at what the promise was that mobile and enterprise mobility is suggesting that it was going to deliver or will deliver for us. And this is borne out really this order through a number of white papers and a number of reports. But it's the usual suspects at the top, increased productivity, an improvement of customer service, and a decrease of business costs. There's a couple of three that are not surprising, but actually specific to mobile. The first one we touch on is new capabilities. So that's the new capabilities that can be delivered once we extend the Salesforce platform or a platform to a mobile device. So think about the fact that we have a camera constantly or a multitude of sensors. What could we enhance? Geolocation, actually recording where we are, or providing logic based around that knowledge of the device. And as the sensors ramp up, thermometers and pressure sensors and so on, some more very specific use cases are no doubt going to be extended for those new capabilities. We talked about more data and better quality data. More data in the sense that it's much easier if we move from pen and paper to capture a lot more data without a lot more input from whoever's using the device. And also because we can wrap some logic around that capture points and some gates, if you like, around the data itself that's core, we can ensure it has a better quality. And lastly, community engagement. And we've seen that a little bit with Salesforce, with the chatter product, being able to extend out via the mobile and have members of our organisation really coming further into the core of the organisation. But mobile takes that further again and extends that to, say, our volunteers or our customers. And so this community engagement becomes a lot easier and, in fact, actually becomes very natural. And so we were then asking the question, why not? Why are we not seeing enterprise mobility being delivered into these organisations and the value realised? And again, we opened up the questions into the room, and cost, security, and a few others were mentioned. So we moved forward and started to look at those a little bit more. And really what it boils down to is that actually it's very, very hard to do properly. We're going to go into these in a bit more depth in a second. It is also really risky. Again, we'll see why that risk is greater than maybe on-premise or delivering into a workspace where it's controlled. And it is never ending. And that really is the one that gets us without any foresight. It's going to come and get us quite quickly. So let's delve into these. Why is it so hard? Well, basically, apps that just work, like our Amazon app that we were using as a reference there before, these apps don't just happen to just work. There's a lot of thought from a design perspective, from the user interface, the user experience, as well as the design of how the data, what data, and why that data will go to the device. Also, offline is a massive issue, often ignored or paid lip service to. And we're not talking about not just having a signal. So, for instance, in more countries where we've got developing infrastructure, but even in countries where we have a developed infrastructure, I'm sure the majority of us listening to this have experienced some outage of signal when we're moving around in fairly built up areas. So patchy connection offline is as important as no connection offline. So that's dropped connections. And as we start to think about offline, it's actually only one part of a robust application. So many more things like batteries failing and so on have to be thought about. That's not normal for us today in enterprise software. And the other thing is, of course, mobile workers themselves are mobile. Sounds obvious, but we often miss that in the sense that any deployment, any support actually starts to scale up very quickly in terms of the number of people that we're supporting. So in an office-based deployment or a single location-based deployment, maybe 20 or 30 people that are being supported, or 200 or 300 people supported, it's going to be a lot easier than, say, supporting that 200 or 300 or 2,000, 3,000 when they're distributed geographically around the country, or even around multiple countries around the world. So it's something else to bear in mind. Let's move on to risk. Why is it so risky? Basically, we're not in control of so many things. The connection being the most obvious that we've spoken about, but we're not in control of the devices, where those devices are, how they will be used, how they'll be stored, how they'll be charged. And we're not in control of where that user is and how strong that connection is, as we said before, but also the way people interact with applications. Often moving from one to another and back to the other, as that seems much more natural to do on a mobile device. And the risk really comes in is that if this app stops working, so does the business. And what we really mean is, if we can create an app that works and we pop that out into the field, it won't be long before that's taken for granted. Paper forms are removed, any backup processes are probably removed as well, and suddenly our app stops, and so does our business. So it is risky, and really focusing in on one of the elements that's always brought up through these presentations is cost. Cost, even when known at the outset, can really spiral up very quickly. Not really to do with the application design, as in the requirements of the app, but as these challenges surface to say, okay, we've got the app, now what does it do when it goes offline or loses a connection or the battery runs out, and so on and so forth. And finally, why is it never ending? This is really to do with the march of technology, particularly the march of mobile technology, where we have new devices. We asked the question in the presentation, how many people had their device for more than 2 years, and I think that it's about 40, 45 attendees, and I think only one had their device longer than 2 years. So this pace of devices changing, so our application is going to be used on lots of different devices on a regular basis, and potentially the same application being moved from device to device, or potentially running on multiple devices. New mobile operating systems, again, in the last year, all of us on Android and iOS will have had at least one operating system upgrade, no doubt. And that's not normal in a corporate setting, in an office-based setting. Our OSs are locked down and they remain stable. Now we have no control over those, at least today, and that means we've got to be aware that the never-ending upgrades of OSs are going to happen whether we like it or not. And of course, new business requirements. It's never-ending because we want to take advantage of new opportunities or battle against new challenges. And finally, new technologies in general. The pace of mobiles is one part in terms of the devices and the operating systems, but we get extra sensors and extra form factors that we really want to be able to take advantage of. And really what we want to bring over as a message in this point is actually today it is all down to you the organisation, you the individual who's speccing these applications, writing requirements and pushing them through to the field. But we don't want that to be all doom and gloom. This is the challenges that we need to be aware of. and then make sure that as a group we start to minimize those and put systems in that remove them where possible. So a little bit about a personal case study of mine, which was a small, working for a company which had a field staff working in the UK, and all we really wanted was to have a mobile application based on the Force.com platform that allowed these field staff, these engineers, to arrive at a location, to log on to a particular job that they were tasked to do, and to complete that job, and also to order any parts that they happen to have used to replenish their vehicle. And actually the application itself was fairly easy to write. The problems really started when we really delved into particularly into offline, but in more general terms, robustness. And then we started to get hit with operating system upgrades, device upgrades, and all the other things that I've mentioned before. And it was really, really frustrating because the value of the application, there was no doubt of that. We managed to remove a big tranche of administrational costs, increase the quality of the data and the quantity of the data we were bringing in, and really increase customer satisfaction. But that was no good if we could only do that half the time. And in fact, that's the key point here. An application, a mobile application that only works half the time is actually worse than useless, because we have to run duplicate systems for when that fails, and we may make bad decisions based upon that lack of data. So really, really was a problem, and it was very frustrating for myself. So we took the chance about 5 or 6 years ago to start to look at how we would deal with this problem more on a generic basis rather than a specific app. So it really boils down to the fact that the cloud is up there and we're all mobile down here, wandering around, going in and out of connection, changing our devices, and generally being a nuisance to anyone who's trying to deliver us a solid, performing, robust mobile application. So the key message, what should be considered absolute critical requirements and when we start out onto our mobile strategy journey, whether that be a single app or an app that's going to form the basis of a much more enhanced solution as we go forward. So the best way to think about that is really to understand that we're not just trying to solve for today. So today, definitely, we do need a design criteria for enterprise mobile apps, something that we can all say, yes, these 4 or 5 items ticked off, and we're very happy with that criteria, with that design. But we also need to be thinking about tomorrow, as we've seen just by looking at some of the problems, that a deployment that worked today needs to be really monitored, both for our users, the devices, and the data that's interacting backward and forward from the platform. And also, we need to be thinking about the future. It's no good having an application that costs X and then continues to cost another X and another X every time we want to make a change, even be that a small change to take either advantage of some future technologies that have come out, or change of devices, or because we want to change our business requirements, because we have a change of direction or an opportunity that we want to actually bring into the business. So the first one we're thinking about today is more design. We're not going to get too technical, but really, if we think about these 5 items summed up in Moore's design, it's mobile first. And that means the application itself is expected to be mobile, expected to move around. It's expected to be used by users who are mobile predominantly in the way that they work. And then offline first. Whatever the state of the connection, strong, poor, or non-existent, we should always expect that the app is offline, and that way we don't have to worry anymore about the state of that connection. However, that rolls into robustness just because we start, let's say, a save or a record online does not necessarily mean that it's going to remain online during that transaction. And so robustness allows us to think about handling failures gracefully, both in terms of protecting the platform as well as also not disturbing the person using the application, the user, through what we would term as user experience. Big subject, but it can be summed up in that robustness. And also efficiency. Efficiency is important, whether we be in a developed infrastructure or a developing infrastructure. The cost of data, not only in monetary terms, but also the size of the data increases the chance of failure in terms of the data interaction. So everything must be thought through in terms of efficiency, why we would bring certain records down, the size of the records, and so on. And lastly, this S on the end of our model design, which is a shared but separated. And what we mean there is really that logic that's designed, logic flows that are designed to work on the platform must also be shared in their outcome on the device, but separated so that they can run independently if there is no connection. And then for tomorrow, deployment and monitoring. We need to be able to continually deploy this application and manage those deployments, bearing in mind that majority of these users will potentially be very, very geographically dispersed from the point of origin of the organization. We need to monitor all those sessions to make sure if there are issues that we're on top of them straight away. And also our configurations, our data configurations need to be continually tested because they change on the platform, particularly if we're a developing organization, in the sense that we're continually taking advantage of new processes that the business is bringing in. And really sum up the whole thing and just assume the worst and have a system that watches and alerts us to any potential issues. A little bit about the MobileCaddy non-profit program. We really aim to deliver the shared value into our own culture, and what we mean there is how we leverage our products, our skills, knowledge and networks to invest back into the non-profit leaders. And we'll have a look at some examples in terms of our seed applications coming forward in this presentation. We're very lucky to have worked with a founding partner, Sanergy, which we'll have a look at in one of the use cases. And how we worked with Sanergy is we went through really a three-step process. We spent some time with them discovering what could be achieved. They had a pretty clear idea, so we just needed to have a little bit of a backward and forward nurturing process to make sure that that was actually executable. We then moved on to the execute side, where we build proof of concept applications that are fully working applications to really get buy-in from IT up or from the program manager across, depending on who we're working with at that point. And that's the show, and then we train the organisation to be able to execute that themselves so that it's a sustainable model, either through their own in-house developers or potentially through their consultancy partners. And then finally, where we can, we share that application. We anonymise it, take anything out that's sensitive, and so that other organisations who start to work with us through the discover stage can use a lot of this design and the code, and then push that learning back out into the wider non-profit ecosystem. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at an application. This is a Sanergy field application. It's shown here running on a tablet. It's what we call responsive, so it can go onto pretty much any device, any size, form factor. So think of screen sizes. And what sounds like fairly basic requirements, really, but as you can hear from my personal use case, these are not as easy to get out into the mobile world as it first sounds. So they're absolute high-level requirement was to digitise their franchisee and asset field reporting system. They knew they would have no data connection throughout the day. They're a Kenyan-based organisation working in rural locations. They wanted to completely remove the paper-based processes and with a nice bit of forethought, really, create a base application that they can build out from. So today, doing the asset field reporting, but maybe tomorrow doing some financial transactions that they need to do, and so on and so forth, and really use that first application version as our base to move up from. And also take advantage of some of the new capabilities that would be possible by using both a combination of the mobile devices and some of the technologies that we don't have until we're actually on mobile devices. So an example there, when they're doing their asset reporting, we can now take a photo and upload that to the platform, or we can record the location where that field report was undertaken. What we see now is a real live running application. It's running in an emulator, but this would be on a Nexus tablet or similar. And we can see how basic we can start, but how quickly things can ramp up. So here, for example, we've got a list of the locations where the assets are, and we can drill into those. And so they would be doing a visit. This is dummy data, of course. Slightly different experience because I have to use the mouse to move up and down, but obviously I've used my finger on a device. And so as I'm visiting this location, I can see if payments have been made to me for the franchise and any renewal items outstanding. I can also see the previous reports that have been made for this particular location. So this is the asset reports. And I can also create a new report. And so here we check that items are actually where they should be. And we again, using the on-screen keyboard of the device, and I can ensure that the assets there were checked, and then I can submit that back to the platform. Now, when we look at the requirements, what we need to understand is to start with the basic processes and build out so that the organisation themselves can get comfortable. Because one of the things that can happen very quickly is some very negative feedback. And that feedback actually is excellent feedback, because what the users are really saying is, I like this, but this is wrong. And so from an organisation perspective, we can say, well, we've only got to solve these problems and we'll have the perfect app. And really we're starting to look at how versioning and why versioning, why this thought process of only saying I need a single app is wrong. It's much more of a journey to deliver the requirements into the field on an ongoing basis. So let's have a move across now and have a look at another proof of concept application. So both of these that we're showing here came through the non-profit program, our MobileCaddy non-profit program, whereby an organisation needed some way of saying this is possible. Let's just pull it back there, apologies. That this application is possible. And so we build internally a proof of concept application that is using real data. It may be sandbox data, but it's real data nonetheless, and is actually deployable from the get-go. So we're going to have a look at the requirements for this application, but before I do that, I'm just going to kick off the emulator so that can load while we're running through those. So for the welfare app, it's a requirement from a non-profit with a multinational field staff working in multiple countries who have care workers visiting sponsored children and ensuring that the programs that they're delivering are actually having the effect that they want. And the basic requirement was to create reports on the health and the welfare of these children that are being visited. Similar to the Sanergy use case, there was no connection at all in rural areas, although in the towns there was going to be a patchy connection, as we would probably see in the UK where I am, or in the US. And so really wanted to take the basis of this report and build an app, this app to run on. And so what we've got again running in there, this is close to an iPad size, but it could be any tablet. We see we get a list of children that we can visit. We've got a search and so on, but that you would expect to see in any application. And I've got some charting as well. I've only got a few points of data in this one, but you can get the feel that I could have a look at the previous reports that we've made on these children. You can see we collected this on the 17th and we had a height and a weight collected and a nutritional status, for example. So again, just really a concept here. And I have the ability to also add a new report. And what I'm going to do now is, so we're seeing that this would be rolled out, and immediately we would get some negative feedback. And the reason why is, if we have a look at, say, the charting here, I'm just going to run up version 2 of the application. While we're doing that, we'll just go back to the requirements. When you first release that version 1, like I say, you will get a lot of negatives coming back. And that is because people don't interact with paper-based forms as we expect. And also those forms, being paper, can have extra bits written across them or in the top right-hand corner or whatever. And so using this scenario, we would assume we would release this first app, and then we would hear that actually, even though we've gone to the letter of the requirements, what our fictitious nurse Louise was doing was writing a predictive weight for the next visit. And so what we need to do now is we need to add the ability to add in a new weight. So now what we can see is we've got the same basic application, but we're running version 2. And version 2 now has, on our charting, we can see we've got 2 lines. And so what we've got is both an actual, a reported, and a target line. And we can see that this gives us a really good overview of how we're actually doing. And this is only a simple change, but you can see the use case here. You know, the application goes out in the field, application version 1, exactly as we asked. And then we hear back from the field workers themselves that actually that's not how it worked. You know, they used to note down on the top of the piece of paper there that there was a projected weight, for instance, for Benjamin here. And so we've allowed them now, when they add a new report, to be able to add both a current weight and a target weight for the next visit. And it sounds only a very simple requirement, but if versioning and the ability to change the application and to deploy the application easily with no hassle, without pulling in the devices or sending new applications to people, it becomes a real headache and actually slows down, in some cases stops any innovation, any changes to these applications. And all these applications immediately run offline. There's no extra work to be done. And so we can be certain that with the deployment engine and the versioning engine and the monitoring engine, that these requirements were on top of the Moore's design, so that the app actually works itself. We end up with this continuous integration system to allow us to keep innovating and bringing in these new requirements and delivering the value then back into the organization via delivering these new applications into the field. So really the key is that choices when we come to mobiles are everywhere. And if we have these foundational pillars of a design for the application, a monitoring system with a deployment system, and a versioning and enhancement, a continuous integration system. The mobile choices can remain and in fact can increase, as they will do, more devices, more OSs, more form factors, but it allows the organization to build this foundation of continuous delivery, continuous innovation. And so during the presentation, we asked for some app ideas, and we had a number of those discussed, particularly with some volunteers that were out in locations that needed to give feedback on how their placement was going. Again, you can see this very quickly sort of coming into then recording maybe equipment that they needed replenished and so on and so forth. So the idea here was to stimulate really the idea that a single application idea can then go through an iterative process and actually become a core extension of the core, of the platform, and really keep delivering. And again, we opened out to questions then, and I'd push you to please post on the channel here, or I'll give you my contact details and the company contact details shortly. But really, if you're a non-profit and you think that you have an idea for an application and you're worried about either the robustness of that application, that's today, you're worried about how you would deploy that application, how you would monitor it, or you're worried about how quickly that application would have to iterate to be enhanced, then please give us a shout, because we're always looking for proof of concepts, because we actually then, as I say, anonymize those and allow those to go back into the non-profit ecosystem, keep this value creation process going forward. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Please jump onto our organization Twitter account, MobileCaddy.org, or contact me directly at ceo@mobilecaddy.net. If you have developers in your organization, please point them to developer.mobilecaddy.net, where they'll be able to run up an application in a developer environment, a Salesforce developer account, and actually start to work with a couple of the seed apps that we've seen, plus a few more, and get something working for you very quickly as a concept. Alternatively, as I say, please contact one of us at MobileCaddy, and we'll see if we can get you into the program. Thanks for your time.